questions feature box, and we will answer as many questions. Our first presenter today will be Karina Chung, who's a research and data associate.
Apologies. I'm sorry. I think we've been having some technical difficulties. Can you hear us now? Please let us know through your chat box. Great. Thank you. Looks like we can. Okay, you can. Okay, let me start all over again. This will be a quick introduction. So again, this is the Data and Communications webinar series, Steps to Making Your Data Matter. The series is a 3-part guide in using data to tell your story in a powerful way. Learn how to access the U.S. Census Bureau through the American Fact Finder database, how to present data in a visually effective way, and how to share your data using different forms of communications. We'll take you through the process, this webinar series, with step-by-step process using relevant data and in your communities on the Affordable Care Act. Today's webinar series will be on how to make your data look pretty, creating tables, graphs, and infographics. And our presenters today will be Karina Chung, the Research and Data Associate, and AJ Tichang, the Communications Specialist at the Health Forum. This webinar series is hosted by the Asian Pacific Islander American Health Forum. We influence policy, mobilize communities, and strengthen programs and organizations to improve the health of Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. And before we get started, we like to take care of some housekeeping items. All participants are automatically muted by the webinar administrators. Throughout the webinar, you may type in your questions under the questions feature box, and we will answer as many questions as we can towards the end of the presentation. This presentation will be available online on our YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/APIAHF. And again, just to remind folks, this is part 2 of our Data and Communications webinar series. The first webinar was last week, and it was on how to find your data using American Fact Finder. And from that webinar, we collected some data, and for today's webinar, we will be turning that data into something pretty. In 2 weeks, we will have our last webinar series on how to share that infographic using social media and other forms of communications. So please, if you haven't registered yet, please do so by going onto our website. Our presenters today are Karina Chung. She is a Research and Data Associate here at the Health Forum. And what does she like about data? She likes data because it gives us evidence to tell a powerful story. And what are her tips on finding data? Be resourceful and patient. The other presenter will be myself, AJ Titong. I am the Communication Specialist here at the Health Forum, and some of my thoughts on infographics. People will most likely remember a visual image versus a bunch of numbers in a table or a Word document. Some of my tips for making that data look pretty: keep it simple and to the point. Today's webinar, the intent of this webinar is to demonstrate how to communicate data clearly and effectively through tables, graphs, and infographics. The first part, which Karina will be presenting, will be about organizing that data. How to clean your data, how to create a table from that data, and then from the second part of the webinar, we'll be using PowerPoint to create infographics. So I'll be going over what to know about infographics, and how to create an infographic with our data that we collected last week. So part one, organize your data. Karina, please take it away.
Hi AJ, thank you for the introduction. For those of you who were able to participate with us last week, we learned how to pull some data from American Fact Finder. The data that we were asked to pull was for a national scope. We were asked to pull data for the general population, Asians, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. And we're asked to pull data on health insurance coverage, nativity, and citizenship status in light of recent efforts around immigration reform and healthcare reform. So let's look at how we're going to start to manipulate our data to actually start showing what these numbers look like. Some of you may remember that this is the Excel table that we downloaded from American Fact Finder. You can see that we have our populations, total population, Asian alone or in combination, and Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders. And let's see the rest of the table. We're looking for data on nativity and citizenship status, which we can see right here. And the rest of the data that we want is health insurance coverage, which you can see right here. As you can see from the table, it's not the most attractive looking thing. We probably wouldn't want to share this with staff or colleagues who aren't really familiar with the table or comfortable looking at numbers. And so one of the first things I want to do is start cleaning the data or cleaning the table. The first thing I'll start off is with removing unnecessary text. These here are notes by the U.S. Census Bureau that kind of informs us information about the data. This is really useful information. It's something that you should read before you delete it. Since we don't need this for the table, what I'm going to do is delete these few rows. I also note that at the very bottom of the table, there's even more information. Again, this is important information to read, and once you're familiar with it, you can go ahead and delete it. So I'm going to highlight the rows. I'm going to delete the information. Now let's go back up to the top of the table. So I can see, looking at the columns of Excel, that there are more columns than that are actually in the table, which means that for some of the columns in the table, the cells are actually merged. I don't like that because it's going to make it harder to manipulate a table. So to make it easier to read, what I'm going to do is expand the columns. I'm going to do that by adjusting the column width. So I'm going to right-click the rows. I'm going to select column width. And for column width, I'm just going to put in a number, let's say 15. That makes it a lot easier to see the table once you expand it. So now we can see for the first table column, it actually takes up 3 columns in Excel. We don't need that, so what I'm going to do is delete column B and C. And I'm going to expand column A to make it easier to read. And now we can look at our next table column. For total population estimates, it takes up 3 columns in Excel. So let's go ahead and delete C and D. And now we can see for the rest of the table, one Excel column represents 1 column in the table. So now it's going to be a lot easier to start manipulating the table. Next, what I'm going to do is start deleting the unnecessary content from the table that we weren't asked to pull. So our first row of data is total population. Even though we weren't asked to pull total population numbers, I am going to keep this because it's good to have just in case. So I'm going to start deleting everything underneath that. And so I'm looking for right now is the nativity and citizenship status data. I'm going to highlight all the rows until that point. So now we can see we're at place of birth. I do want these rows, so everything highlighted in blue, I'm going to delete that. I also wasn't asked to pull sex-specific data, so I'm going to go ahead and delete those few rows. And now this is the last column of place of birth data and citizenship status, so everything underneath, I'm going to start deleting that. Now again, we're looking for health insurance coverage status. So I'm going to highlight everything I don't want until I find the health insurance data. And now that I see that, I'm going to delete everything above it. And I'm not interested in anything else, so I'm going to go ahead and delete the rest of the table. So now we have the information we want, but it's not exactly in the format we want it to. So let's go ahead and start cleaning up this table even more. First things first, I'm going to look at margin of error. This is useful information to know about your data. It tells you how confident you can be that your estimates are correct or as close to the truth as possible. Because most people aren't interested in margin of error outside like the research and data world, I'm going to delete this column for now. I'm going to do that for all three populations. And so now looking at the rest of the data we have, you can see that we have estimates of people who fall into these certain categories. But we also have percents. What I want to do is put all of the estimates on one side, and I want to move percents to the other side. So the blank columns we have here, here, and here, I'm going to use that to insert percentage data. So once I type that, I'm just going to copy it and paste it to the other cells. So now for each population group, we're going to have estimates and percentages. And so the next thing to do would be to start filling out these empty cells. So let's start looking at the data more closely. You can see that in these cells, there's a little green triangle in the top left-hand corner. That green triangle indicates that in Excel, what they see are not numbers, but actually text. And what we want to do is make sure that Excel knows that in this table, in these specific columns, that these are actually numbers, so we can start calculating the numbers. And so one way to do that is to reformat the cell content. You can see that when I click this cell, B7, and I look at the value and this bar up here, that Excel actually sees commas in here. Now, when we write numbers, like say on a notepad, when we're in Microsoft Word or something, we do insert commas into our numbers to make it easier to read. In Excel, we don't need to do that, and we don't want to because there's a way to format it, which Excel will do it for us. But because there are commas right now, we want to go ahead and take those commas out and later reformat the content so Excel knows that they are numbers. So what I'm going to do is to delete the commas. And instead of going through each and every cell and deleting the commas by hand, I'm going to use a find and replace function. And there are two ways I can do that. I can go to the top right corner of the ribbon and click find and select replace. Or what I can do is on my keyboard press Control and F. I'll see the find and replace window. So I'm going to go to the replace tab. What I want to do is have Excel find all the commas. I'm going to insert a comma, and I want to replace the comma with nothing. So I'm going to leave it blank there. I'm going to click replace all. And you can see that now there are no more commas left, and that all the green triangles for the estimates are deleted. And so now we can go ahead and format these so that they are easier to read. I'm going to right-click the cells that I want to reformat. I'm going to click Format Cells. I want to change the format of the number. And if I selected General, this is what the original content in each cell is. But I want to tell Excel that these are numbers. I'm going to highlight Number. I want to tell Excel that I don't want any decimal places because we can't have only a part of a person, so I'm going to select 0. I want to insert a 1,000 separator, in other words, a comma. And so now these numbers are a lot easier to read. Now let's look at the health insurance data that we have right now. These are percents, and we also have the problem of the green triangles. We want to tell Excel again that these are numbers. So I'm going to do what we did before. I'm going to delete the percentages. I'm going to press Control F to pull up the Find and Replace window. Similar to before, I'm going to find the percentages and replace them with nothing, essentially deleting them. I'm going to replace all. So now we have whole numbers here. We actually want these to be percents or decimals. We want to move that to this column. So what I'm going to do is a quick little formula, and I'm going to type an equal sign in the cell that I want my value to be in. I want to change the cell right next to it, B15, into percent, and I'm going to do that by dividing it by 100. Now we can see we have 0.662, in other words 66.2%. So I'm going to repeat this formula for all the other blank values that we want a percent in right here. And so what I could do is type in the formula over again, but instead I'm actually going to copy and paste it. So I'm going to copy it, paste it into the cell. And you can see that if you compare the formulas in this cell, C15 with C16, they're actually a little different. You can see at the front that for the C15 formula, it's B15 divided by 100, whereas in cell C16, it's actually B16 divided by 100. Now Excel is helpful in that it assumes that because we're moving one cell down, it also assumes that we want to move the value here in the formula one cell down. So I'm going to go ahead and copy value again. And we can see again that the formula has changed. It has moved one cell down. And so what I'm going to do is copy these 3 cells that we just created values for. I'm going to copy them and paste them over here. And again, Excel knows that since we moved our destination cell to the right, they're also going to move the formula cells to the right. I'm going to copy and paste this again one more time. And so now we have our decimal values. I'm going to turn these, I'm going to reformat these into percents. So I'm going to select all the cells I want to reformat. I'm going to right click in the selected area. I'm going to click Format Cells. I want a percentage, so I'm going to select percentage. And I only want one decimal place, so I'm going to change that to 1. And now we have this. And so these numbers, we don't need them anymore. We want to actually calculate the estimates. And so let me show you something. If I delete a value here, you can see that this cell, the percentage of private health insurance for the total population has changed. And that's because in Excel, this particular cell doesn't see the value of 66.2%. What it really sees is the formula B15 divided by 100. So I need to tell Excel that, no, I want you to keep the value here. So what I'm going to do is copy all the cells that I want to tell Excel to keep as a value. I'm going to copy it. Once I copy it, I'm going to paste special and particular values. And what that means is that we copy these numbers. When we paste it as a value, we told Excel not to paste a formula, but to paste a value. So now you can see that, unlike before, in the cells, the content's actually 66.2%. And now I can go ahead and delete these values without changing that value. So I'm going to delete everything else. And now the rest is to calculate the missing percentages for nativity and citizenship data, and then to calculate the estimates for health insurance data. And so like before, we're going to do a few formulas. It's pretty simple. I'm going to type in an equal sign for the cell I want to insert a new value. I want to calculate the percent of total population that is born in the U.S. And so I'll do that is using this value B9 divided by the total population. And so we can see that there's been some formatting that we don't want. It's actually a 1. What I want to see is a percent. So I'm just going to highlight those numbers. I'm going to format the cells and go to percentage, want 1 decimal place. And so now we can see a percent. So I'm going to go ahead and repeat the formula for the rest of these cells. So if you can see here, earlier when Excel was helpful in that it changed the formula to match the new cells. That's helpful if the cells in your formula need to change along with the new destination cells, but it's not helpful if you want to continue using one cell in a formula. So what I'm going to do is make sure that Excel knows that I want, whenever I calculate my percentage, whatever cell I use, I'm going to add a constant. So here, doing B10, I want it to always divide by the total population. And so to add a constant to make sure the value doesn't move, I'm going to insert a $sign. This is going to tell Excel that whatever formula I copy and paste into any other cells is always going to stay in row 7. So a $sign before the row number is going to keep it in the same place. So let me show you what that looks like. So I'm going to copy that. I'll paste it into other cells. You can see that it always stays at B7 because of the $sign. So I'm going to repeat this process for the Asian and Native Hawaiian other Pacific Islander columns. Equals, let's see, the estimated number of Native Asians divided by total population. I want to make sure Excel doesn't change D7, so I'm going to insert a $sign. Need to change the formatting of that. Change it to 1 decimal place. Now let's go ahead and copy that into the other cells and see what that looks like. So you can see that for the rest of the citizenship data for Asians, that it always stays the same at D7. And I'm going to repeat the process for Native Hawaiian other Pacific Islanders divided by this value. I want it to stay constant. I'm going to insert a $sign. And I'm going to reformat these cells. And so now we have estimates and percents for all our nativity and citizenship data. Let's go ahead and calculate our estimates for our health insurance data. So we're going to work a little backwards. I'm going to do equals the percent times the total. So to use a times sign, I'm going to use an asterisk. And like before, I want to make sure that when we do calculate the public coverage data and the no health insurance coverage data, they're always using this value. So I'm going to insert the $sign to keep it constant. And another way to copy and paste our values is to hold our cursor at the bottom right corner of the cell and drag it down. So let's repeat that process for Asians. And copy, so it's E15 times D14. I want to insert the $sign to keep it constant. And one more time for Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders. So now that we've finished filling out our table, let's go ahead and double check the numbers to make sure that we calculate correctly. It's always good to double check what you do. So let's see, for Native, we calculate the percentage of total population. That's Native born, so that's correct. Let's double check Asians, the percentage or the estimated number of people who are foreign born, not U.S. citizen. Looks good. And let's look at an estimate for Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders, the number who do not have health insurance. Looks good. And just in case, if I send this table to a colleague, I want to make sure that they don't accidentally change the values and disrupt the formula. So I'm going to do is just copy the whole table, and I'm going to paste the values so that we no longer see any percents. And now I'm going to work on formatting some of the numbers. You can see for estimates of health insurance data that we have decimals. We don't want that since we can't have only parts of people. I'm going to highlight the cells that I want to change the format to. Right click, format cells, want a number, no decimal places, and I want to use a thousand separator or a comma. So now our number is a lot easier to read. So you might have noticed that we have a few empty cells, and that's total percent of total population, as well as percent of civilian non-institutionalized population. So the reason why we don't have a percent for total population is because this would actually just be 100% since it's counting everyone in the U.S. And for civilian non-institutionalized population, the reason why we have this additional number is that to calculate health insurance coverage, the U.S. Census Bureau doesn't consider the total population in their estimates because anyone who's institutionalized or incarcerated should have health insurance coverage in their facility, and therefore it doesn't quite make sense to include them in the value. So this is good for us to know. If I send this table to a colleague, they might not be familiar with this and it might not really be that relevant. So I'm actually just going to go ahead and delete that row. And I'm going to do some more formatting. Right here we have a row that says United States. It's good to know your population. I wouldn't necessarily put it like this. So I'm going to delete that for now. I'm going to add that later. Total population, that looks good. Asian or lower combinations of one or more races. And we don't need these codes that American Fact Finder assigned. I'm actually going to delete everything up to Asian. And I'm going to do the same for Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islander. And actually I'm going to delete other right here. Learned from my Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander colleagues that this other category, although the U.S. Census Bureau uses it, is not something that people in the NHGRI can use. So out of respect, I would like to delete that. Remember, it's always important that in your data you consider your audience and who the data is for and what's it about, and making sure that it does always stay respectful to the different communities it represents. So we do have our population identified here. I'm going to format this so it's a little bit more aesthetic to the eye. I'm going to highlight these cells and I want to center them. It's really up to you how you want your table to look. Just make sure that's easy to read. Whenever you do format your numbers, you can either center them or right align, which is something I see often. And it makes it easy to read the numbers because all the decimal places are lined up. When you do have numbers, I wouldn't ever really recommend using left align because it does throw your numbers in a way that the numbers aren't lined up. So for now, I'm just going to center it. I want to look at these headers. I don't need this row, so I'm going to delete that. Total population, I'm going to keep that. Place of birth, citizenship status, and year of entry. We don't have year of entry data. And now that we only have place of birth and citizenship data, I'm actually going to retype this since I don't like using caps in my tables. I'm going to title it Nativity, which is the same thing as place of birth, and citizenship status. Health insurance, I'm also going to retype that without the caps. You can see that for nativity and citizenship status that the heading isn't really easy to read, so just to make it stand out a bit more, what I'm going to do is merge that whole row. You can see that Excel gives us a warning. The selection contains multiple data values. Merging into one cell will keep the upper leftmost data only. That's okay with me. Whenever we do Excel, just make sure that you don't have cells with different values that you want to keep, because it's only going to keep the top left cell. For this case, it's okay. I don't have any other values here. I'm going to also merge this row. Don't want it centered. I might do something like highlight the row so it stands out a bit more. I could also say italicize it to make it stand out more, or not. It's up to you. For the title of the table, although it's helpful to know the title of the table for American Fact Finder and to know the table ID, this isn't as useful for someone who doesn't plan on using an American Fact Finder. I'm going to delete that. This is the source. That's important to know, but I'm not going to put that as the title of my table. I'm going to cut that out. I'm going to insert the source at the bottom. Be sure that whenever you are reporting data that you always include a source. I don't want the source to be in a cell with wrapped text. I like the source to just fall in one line, so I'm going to unclick wrap text so it looks a bit better. I'd like to add a title. I'm going to say, what do I call it, Nativity, Citizenship Status, and Health Insurance Coverage. I want to make sure that people know that this data is for the United States as a whole, so I'm going to put United States in parentheses. And it's up to you how to specify the geography, but it is important to make sure that whoever is looking at your table does know what the geography is. We can see that United States is cut off. That's because it's in a wrap text cell. So I'm going to unhighlight wrap text. I'm going to unhighlight merge and center so now we can see it. These two cells don't have a border, so I'd like to add a border. And I might bold these to make it easier to read. And so just so that people don't think that these are accidental blanks, I'm just going to insert a dash. And so I'm going to delete this extra row, and now we have a basic table that shows the data we're interested in: nativity and citizenship status, and health insurance coverage. For total population, Asian, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander. You can see that Pacific Islander is actually cut off, and so what I'm going to do is expand the row. And I can either drag a row, what I can also do is highlight the row and adjust the row height. I'm going to change it to 24. I want to double the row height. So it's a little easier to read. For some people, they might not like it if the text is floating on the top. I personally do like to have my cell text in the center line. So I'm going to center it so it's easier to read. And now we have a complete table. This is something that I would say share with our designer who's going to possibly create infographic out of it or send to a report. I would make sure that I would keep the table very simple looking. Adding colors, it's up to the person, but just remember that the goal of your table is to present data in a really simple, easy to read format. Here's a table. Next I'm going to show is how to create a quick graph. And it's very simple. We're going to use this table here, but I'm going to delete a lot of the necessary data that I don't want to include in my graph. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy the table and start deleting things from here because I want to make sure that I maintain the data in this table. If I was interested in, say, reporting nativity and citizenship status, what I'm going to do is delete all the data I don't need. Delete total population. I'm going to delete health insurance coverage. And I only want to report the percentages in my graph. What I'm going to do is delete the estimates. And so since the cell for total population, Asian, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, is merged, I can't only delete this. What I'm going to do is unmerge these. I'm going to highlight them. I'm going to unclick merge and center so that's easier to read. I'm also going to delete this row since it's merged. and I'm going to delete this. So delete. I want the rest of the table to shift to the left, so I'm going to let it go to the default shift cells left. And do that for the other columns. And now I have to fix my table heading, so I'm going to type Asian here. This should be NHPI. And delete that. And so now I have percents. Looking at this table, we can see we have foreign-born data along with foreign-born naturalized U.S. citizen and foreign-born non-U.S. citizen. You can see that these two values are actually added up together. They equal foreign-born. I don't want to repeat these numbers in my graph, so what I'm going to do is just delete this. And so now I have a very simple table that I can turn into a graph or a chart. So I'm going to highlight the table. I'm going to go to Insert tab and click Column. I want to make a bar chart. So I'm going to select a 2D column. So here's a basic chart that Excel creates for us. I might change it a little bit. So what I could do is add some data labels to the bars, so it's easier to read, to know the value. So I can just right-click a bar. I'm going to add a data label. I can do that for all the bars. Say I was interested in having the data grouped by population and not by citizenship status and nativity. So I can do is right-click the chart, and I can go to Select Data, and I can switch row and column. So it can look something like this. I would prefer to have the data grouped by nativity and citizenship status, so I'm going to leave it as is. And notice that in our legend that the percentage content is associated with the population. We don't really need that, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete. So once we change anything in the table, those changes will be reflected in the chart. Everything after this is probably really stylistic changes. It's up to you how you want your chart to look, but to keep it simple looking, I might delete the grid lines to make it easier to read the values. Also for the y-axis, I don't want decimals, so what I might do is just double click it. For the number, I don't want any decimal places. And so I might share something like this with our designer who could reformat it to make it fit with the design. If we're just creating a table, or sorry, a chart to insert into a report, and there's not going to be any additional formatting, then I would recommend adding a title to the chart. So what I would do is click Layout in the ribbon. I can insert Chart Title. I can either Center Overlay Title, which means that would fit right into the graph, or I can have it above the chart. So I might have something such as Nativity and Citizenship Status U.S. And I would also potentially insert the source at the bottom, or if I was inserting to a report, I might type it in directly. So now we have a table and a chart here. And so what I would normally do is either share this with the colleagues directly, or I might send it over to a designer to reformat some more. Or even better, we can turn these numbers into something more exciting like an infographic, which is where I'm going to hand this over to AJ.
Thanks, Karina. As you can see, there's a lot to cleaning up your data and organizing it. Hopefully no one got lost, but the next part should be a little bit interesting. And let's start. So part 2 is using PowerPoint to create your infographics. So why infographics? Infographics are graphical visual representations of information, data, or knowledge. They engage communities of different levels and generations. They make your organization more visually appealing and still share important, and you can still share important data. And it helps you stay better in touch with your community partners. Just think, data is sexy. Okay, so this is one of my favorite infographics. This infographic was shared by good.is. It's a great resource for you all to have. To look at more infographics or examples, please look at the link at the very bottom here where it's good.is/infographics. So this is an infographic on women's health in the U.S. So there's a lot going on over here. You see percentages of the different diseases, chronic diseases, and then what types of factors, health factors there are. There's a lot of colors. There's just information that you'll think, wow, this is so important, and I want to use this information for a presentation or just to show my communities where women's health is at right now. So let's break it down a little bit. What is in an infographic? So one of the important things is having that simple title. Here it's just women's health in the U.S. You don't need anything else. You can create a little description about what the infographic is going to be about. I would keep it to about 2 to 3 sentences and not much longer. Interesting subtitles. You want to capture your audience's attention, not just by the numbers, but you want to tell them what they're looking at. So here it says, managing lifestyle habits is more important than ever. Why? So you see that these numbers are here for you to show. So another aspect of why what is in an infographic are the variation on type sizes. So when I say type, I'm referring to the font or any kind of text that's in the infographic. So here, the percentages are a lot bigger than the text because you want to focus on the number. You can also see that it does a contrast for different aspects of heart disease, 25.8%, cancer, stroke, chronic respiratory disease, Alzheimer's disease, and diabetes. So you can see the differences between each of the different diseases. Illustration, icons, and color. Here, this is a great color palette. It's not too crazy, not too much contrast, but enough contrast for you to tell the difference between each of the different categories here. The use of icons helps us understand what type of item you're talking about. The illustration itself is simple and not too much, but you can still, again, you can tell what each area about the infographic is. Also, if you notice down here in the area where you're managing, where it says manage lifestyle habits is more important than ever, notice how some of the icons are not in color. Some of them are in black and white. So the ones not in color kind of shows, okay, that's not what we're talking about, but we're talking about the icons that are in full color. And then lastly, I mentioned earlier that infographics are good for visually showing your organization and the why it's great to share resources. So on the bottom here, you see a logo from General Electric. You also see that Good put this together, helped put this together, and then there's also resources. So the sources, the data was collected from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And then also over here, there's little items and notes that refer back to the content within the infographic. So remember those key items when you're creating your infographic. So remember the scenario. Karina pulled data for the national data, the population and categories for health insurance and folks in our community. And then this is what she came up with. Well, we can't really show this information, have our communities be excited about it or understand it completely. So we want to find a way to kind of show how this can be more relatable and also easy to understand for folks, not just in the research field, but also in the community, like educators and organizers and that kind of stuff. So what program should you use for creating infographics? Today we're going to use PowerPoint. Most offices use Microsoft Office's PowerPoint program to create presentation slides. And this is probably the most cost-effective because you already have it on your computers. I believe the Mac uses, what is it? Presentation or whatnot, but basically any presentation software you can use is possibly a good use for creating infographics. If you want to get a little more sophisticated, and if you're a little more on the graphic design end and you have access to resources such as Adobe CS6 or whatnot, you can use Illustrator. And in Illustrator, you can create your own icons and illustrations and images and manipulate them in different ways. And then you can also integrate the Excel into your designs as well. And then other programs, again, are Photoshop, Microsoft Publisher, and then online, they also have different infographic softwares that you can use online. Some of them you have to pay for. I would actually not use some of them because they are slower to use, but a popular one is called visually.com, so you can visit that on your own time. So the basics. This image is from HubSpot, and this will be part of, we will be developing a resource guide that will go along with this webinar series. But one of the resources that will be included is an infographic by HubSpot trying to share how to create an infographic using PowerPoint. So here's a screenshot of a basic PowerPoint website. So here you see the home, the themes, the tables, charts, smart art, transitions, and animations. That's basically the main things that you use for creating basic PowerPoint presentations. But here we'll focus on just creating one page and just making sure that folks know where to access the different tools, because the tools are the important part of creating infographics. If you don't know where they're at, you're going to have a little bit of a hard time creating them. So know that under the Home tab, you can find the text, insert picture item, and then shapes. And then those are some of the key items that you will need to know. And then under the format section, there's going to be areas of how you use your color, how it's going to be, how you can use effects and whatnot. So there's a fill effect where it's like the whole color. So in this image, the fill of the background is red. The line effect, which is like what color you want the line of your object to be. Here you can see the circle, a little bit of the circle. It's in an orange outline. And then effects is like if you want to create a shadow, a drop shadow, change the transparency of your item and whatnot. And then styles, again, is referring to kind of like the typefaces and the different ways you can use all of these things combined together. So here's another infographic on how to do basics. And here the infographic kind of shows you how typeface and color are being used to kind of like show a contrast and like to grab your attention in different areas. So here in information, like you see the number is 70. It's a big number. But also here it tells you what the information is. The use of colors. Alternate the color of your text to emphasize certain data. So if I'm trying to compare two sources of data and one is bigger than the other, I would use a huge circle and then like a smaller circle, obviously, for the data showing the least of the number. Here's another great way folks show people or populations in infographics. They actually use people signs or stick figures, as we call them. And this is something that you can create using PowerPoint. So this is a bit of combining different shapes and stuff, but it's once you get the hang of it, you can create these different shapes, and it can be actually fun. So here it's 9 out of 10 marketers will share this. So that's a great way of like representing like how many of what will show it. There are over 100 shapes that can be used to create graphics. All of this, again, is just using PowerPoint. So if you're worried that you don't have, that you don't know how to draw or whatnot, just get used to creating different shapes and like using different colors within those shapes and combining them together to make these infographics look great. Another one, timelines are great to use. Inbound marketers are responsible for finding life on Mars. Here, like important statements. Sometimes you don't need that long, drawn-out sentence describing what the data is. You just need the facts and the points, the get to the point kind of information. And then sometimes other information that's really fun is the random information. So if it's not related, but it is related and it's very interesting, throw that in there if you want to. Okay, so before we get started, using the data that Karina pulled from American Fact Finder. I wanted to do a little bit of image, pictures, and illustration 101 because this is kind of important when creating infographics. So there are three types of formats that we'll be using in creating an infographic. Two of them are, I'm going to focus mostly on this webinar series because we're just creating the infographic. But there is a PNG format and then there's a JPEG format. The PNG format is a lossless compression file format, which makes it a common choice for use on the web. Since infographics are mostly used for the website, we want to stick to PNG. As you can see in the picture, the PNG side is much clearer and there's no little pixels around each of the items or the lines of the image. Here's a JPEG. JPEG formats are usually better for images. So if you're putting in a photo or other stuff like that, it would be better to use that because of the compression of colors within the image. But we want to stay away from using JPEGs, especially if we're doing basic shapes and lines for our infographic. And lastly, we are going to use PDF format is the final stage that we want to put the infographic in. Just because if you want to put it in a document, it could be shared, it could come up easily and it'll show in its richest format if it's being printed out. How do we make this pretty? That's tough because Karina has gone through a lot of information. She showed us how to use formulas for each of these areas. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what we can make, which is very basic. This is not compared to the women's health infographic that I showed you earlier. But here is a very basic infographic that I use just using PowerPoint as a tool to create this. I didn't use Illustrator, I didn't use Photoshop, but this is purely PowerPoint. It could be a little more sophisticated, but I didn't want to confuse you all on how to create it. So I'm going to do some of the items on here to give you an idea of how to create this and how long it takes to create this, but let me start with the basics. So the next slide is a blank slide. We want to, the first thing you want to do is kind of like in your head lay it out, or if you can, sketch it out on a piece of paper where you want to put the information, what information is important and how you want to share it. So first we want to go to the home, insert we want to make a header for the title. So I picked the arrow title here. I'm going to kind of do a little bit here. And then you see how it's all blue. It's a blue, dark blue outline, and it's a blue filling. We want to change that to white. And again, a lot of your tools will be on here on the toolbar area. So don't forget to use them. Don't forget where they're at and how to navigate them. You'll right here, there's an outline. I don't want the outline because it makes it look kind of weird. So make sure it's highlighted, shape outline, and put no outline. So right there you have like a header. This will, it's kind of like it shouts out, it's a call out on your piece of paper, your infographic. So now we want to put the title. So we insert text, and right here, what was our title? Our title was, okay, I'm sorry. Title is, and again, keep it to a simple title. So health insurance coverage. And what is it about? Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. So the topic should always be bigger than the subtopic. Even though it's about Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders, we want people to know what it's about. So we're going to make health insurance coverage really big. First, I'm going to change the typeface to the theme of the typeface that relates to either your branding or the presentation itself. And then I'm going to change the color to brown. And then I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. Let's actually put it here so we can see it. Again, think about what your organization's branding is and what typefaces you generally use all the time. I'm going to make this blue to show a little contrast. I'm going to use uppercase. And then I'm going to align the two lines together. So there's our title. What I like to do when I create infographics is I like to collect images that I've already used before or images that I come across that are interesting. So in this infographic, we've used some images that you can either collect on through your clip art, or you could create these images yourself if you're savvy on Illustrator or Photoshop, or there are some sites online that provide free vector files or free image files that you can use that are not copyrighted. So there are many options online. You just have to search for them. And so let me show you how I will insert some images. So here I have it saved into a file already. I want to put in the population. I'm going to put in a passport to show some of the citizenship information. And then a world map. So some of these pictures, they relate to the data itself. So if you can kind of brainstorm before you create this infographic on what images kind of resonate with the data, start looking for them or start creating them so that the information could be better. So the infographic could be more appealing. So let me include one more. Okay, so there's going to be some little tricky, tedious things that we'll have to do, but let's do a side-by-side of the data that Karina has given us, and then the data that we want to put into the infographic. So as you can see in this in the infographic that I created using Karina's data, all the numbers are not the exact numbers that are on the table that she created for us. But what I did was I've either shortened them and put in $1 million sign, or I've estimated the estimates. Sometimes folks wonder why you would go between the actual number versus the percentage. The reason why I would choose a percentage over the numbers is because if the number is higher in percentage view, then folks are more inclined to remember it. So keep that in mind. So here I put the total population, which is the information up here. And then you can see that I've done a call out with the number in bold and then with a picture next to it. It usually works better when there's a picture next to it. Or if you could come up with some interesting shape that you could put each of the numbers in. But always remember you have to put a subtitle or some kind of title kind of to show you what the numbers are about. Let's see. So let me show you some things that could be a little tedious. A good thing to know about creating images and combining them is that sometimes it helps to group things together. If you're a graphic designer or an illustrator, you know that layering is important. And so in a lot of this, infographics are a bunch of layers because not one of them are stuck together. So I want to show you all the different layers that exist. It might look like a lot of hard work, but really you could just copy and paste from different items to create it. So for example, I've already created this graphic using one of the smart items, Smart Art. So you can go into the Insert tab at the top and click on Smart Art. And here you can see different ways that you can show your information. So really take advantage of those templates that already exist. And in this one, I chose this one because I wanted to show the 3 different kinds of populations. And so that's what it was. And then I typed in the information, and again, I abbreviated the number so that it was shorter and not confusing to look at. For here, what I did was I put the image behind the numbers because I didn't want I wanted to show a direct relationship between the image and the numbers. And so I did a white background image of the U.S., the world map. And what I did was I created a little design piece where it creates a symbol showing where it's at. And so here I'm a little bit of highlighting of the U.S. and it's to reflect the native-borns, the numbers from the native-born that Karina pulled out. And then here on the bottom, I just simply put the passport picture and then the different kinds of foreign-born and naturalized U.S. citizens here in the information. So as you can see, it's a lot of information, it's a lot of layering, but all you have to do is like really just practice creating and like grouping each of the information. Just remember that if you do group your work, make sure that you click on each item. And what's helpful to remember this is if you just hold on to your Shift key on your keyboard and click on an item, let's say for example the data that I typed in and the image, and then image, I right click it and then I group it and then group it together. So now that information is together. I could basically drag it anywhere so that I could reformat it wherever onto the page. That's a cool trick that I can share with you that's very helpful. But other than that, that should be the basics. It's really upon you to practice and kind of know how to use your program, but just as long as you understand the ideas of contrasting the work and the design and making sure you're highlighting the areas that show the most important information, then you'll be able to create an infographic. Maybe not as fancy as this, but as fancy as my last example of the women's health in the U.S. infographic, which is very clean, and it shows a lot of information, and there are a lot of details to it. Okay. Last but not least, I kind of want to show you how to save this. Because we are in a PowerPoint presentation, I want to make sure that you all know that you could take this image basically anywhere and include it in any Word documents, presentations, reports, in your social media, which we will be talking about next in 2 weeks. But so what you do is you drag and click the whole screen where the images are, all the layers are. And what you want to do here is you want to right-click again, and then, right-click again, and then group this image together. Like I mentioned earlier, using a PNG format is the best way to go. Later, if you use other software like Illustrator or InDesign or Photoshop, you can save it to many different formats and in different resolutions. But if you don't have access to that kind of resource, then this is your second best way to do it. So now it's all grouped together. You want to right-click it, and then, oops, I guess it's not saved all together. Let's see. Want to right-click it and save it. Where is that? Save as a picture. So you're actually clicking on the image and saving it as a picture. So you save it onto your desktop or wherever you want to put it and title it as a PNG. You could also save it as a JPEG, but again, please use PNG to make it easier for yourself. PNG also saves it as a transparency background. As JPEG, it will have an automatic white background. So if you're working on an infographic or a report or a presentation, and there's a different color background that goes along with the theme of that report, you want to make sure that there's not this big white blob that's like taking over that page or whatnot. Okay, and to close it off, I wanted to again go through some tips, final tips for creating that infographic. So again, browse the web for ideas on different kinds of infographics. Good.is, yes, it's a website, is a great resource. resource. There are different types of infographics, and you know what? They're kind of progressive infographics that relate to our community, so it's definitely a good thing to take a peek at. If you have a chance, the best thing to start off your infographic after getting that data is to start sketching out how you want to lay out the information and what kind of images you want to use. So collect your images and or illustrations into one folder and make sure most of all the images are in PNG format. And don't forget to label your data. That's really important because we want to make sure that people can refer back to like who your data source is or what the numbers are actually referring to. And then lastly, like always, this is something you learn in high school and in college. Always save your work consistently because you don't want to lose the work that took you forever to do. It won't be that forever once you become more advanced in creating infographics, but just keep practicing and look online. There are templates online of different infographics, so if you have the capacity to use InDesign or Illustrator, you can download those vector files and kind of use those images to guide you in creating different illustrations. And that's pretty much a wrap on the infographics part. So now we're taking questions.
Thanks, AJ, for the wonderful presentation on infographics. Can you share with our audience what we can expect to share in terms of any more resources or webinar presentation or?
So with this webinar series, we are coming out with a guide that will have a list of resources, screenshots of how-tos. And so if you missed a certain part that looked a little confusing on the data part or the infographic part, it will be in that guide. And this guide will be shared towards the end of the series, which is 2 weeks from now for the social media and communications aspect of it.
And can you also share with us some places or resources that we can get ideas for designs in addition to good.is?
There is visually.com. I think it's visually. Let me go to it right now. Visually.ly. So here, this is a website solely just on infographics. If you sign up with them, you can actually use their templates and plug in some of your own information. Again, when you use an online source, sometimes you're limited as to what you can create. But this is just a great place to kind of like look at examples of how you can develop your infographics. So here's an example of one. In here. And then I like to use other sites such as designshack.com. See if it pops up. Oops. It's designshack.net, I'm sorry. But here it will give you ideas of like different graphic design styles and how-tos. There's galleries and examples of how to do certain things. So you could get some ideas off of here. And another great thing that I like to look at, I know like some folks are like, well, I can't create stick figures by myself. So what you can simply do is Google vector files or free vector files. And there are websites that have free art that you can use and download. So here are like examples of icons basic icons that you can use and throw into your infographic that you can download for free. So those are some neat resources you can find online.
When we are downloading vector files or any other resources for infographics, are there things that we should worry about in terms of internet security or avoiding downloading viruses, or do you have any recommendations?
So far, I haven't gotten any viruses downloading these vector files. I mean, as long as you clear out your cookie box or whatnot, and make sure that you close all of your windows at the end. It should be fine. But I will have a preferred list in the guide that we will share, and so those are the go-tos that I have that are safe.
We have a question from or actually we have a suggestion from someone that's really helpful, and if we can go to the Excel page, the way I showed you how to format your table, I use a menu by right-clicking whatever cell is interested in, but definitely explore the menu on the top. You have a lot of different options, and these options were introduced with the latest versions of Microsoft Office. And so it's an easy way to access formatting options, but just keep in mind it's a great idea to explore all the different functions that are possible in Excel as you start formatting your tables. I think that's it for our questions for now. If anyone has any last minute questions, please feel free to put them in the questions box.
And contact us if you have any specific questions. Karina is a little more savvier on the data, and I know a little more on the infographic stuff, or the graphics.
I think that is all the questions we have for now. Thank you everyone for joining us in this webinar today. We hope that you will come meet up with us again 2 weeks from now, where AJ will do a wonderful presentation on next steps on what to do with your data. The next step will be disseminating the data and sharing all the great information you have.
And please follow us online at www.apiahf.org. And from there, you can click on these different social media icons to follow our direct sites. Thank you.